Egypt's young manhood. They compare very favorably with our own football Huskies, don't they? After all, youth is not so different the world over. Men like these would seem to hold great promise for the future of any land. One can readily see the mark of the builders of the pyramids and the Sphinx in these husky bodies. Their faces are clean and honest. What does fate hold in store for them? Here are some of them in India. Cotton is one of Egypt's chief products. See how a single man, barefoot and in the boiling sun, carries a 300-pound bale, not on a truck as we do, but on his back. Now see his buddies load a modern railway train in the same manner in which they have loaded ox carts for centuries. We see them irrigating the vast valleys. No modern methods here, just primitive, hard endurance. Imagine doing this from sunup to sundown. What stamina! But there is a sinister menace undermining these workers. Egypt, for the past few years, has been the center of the drug traffic from the east. Great quantities of destructive narcotics have been smuggled into this country in shipments of fruit. A very wholesome-looking orange can shelter destruction. Even the native bread has been found purveying this soul-destroying viciousness. There are no ends to which these ruthless smugglers will not go to transport drugs. Let us cite one of the most interesting cases of smuggling to come to knowledge. A camel caravan was crossing the Palestine frontier. It was particularly noticeable to a Sudanese corporal that these camels had not been clipped that year, as was the custom. He thought he would buy one cheap for the wool which brought a good price. He ran his fingers through the silky hair on the camel's hump, when suddenly he encountered something hard. Egypt is bravely facing a terrific problem. Europe's limitation of the manufacture of drugs to the amount necessary for medicinal use has encouraged the illicit manufacture in the Far East. Heavily patrolled borders with many custom houses make smuggling through Europe more difficult. Hence the terrific trek across the desert. And these desert police deserve much credit for their brave efforts. Imagine the cleverness of the men dealing in this unlawful trade. These trips are engineered by the craftiest underworld minds, as it is so highly profitable. $6,000 worth of hashish was being transported in this instance, and hashish is the most difficult to hide, as it has greater bulk than the other drugs. One glance at these hardened prisoners bears out this statement. Not only is the smuggling through the country a problem, but it has caused a vast increase in drug addiction in the country. And now comes the dope peddler. He creates his vile trade by promise of greater sexual ability. He is not even satisfied at creating addicts, but also cheats his trade by adulterating drugs with crushed human skulls. These are some of his doomed victims. Gone is their desire for work. Gone are the thoughts of the glory of Egypt. Gone are ambition, health, and friends. And in their places, look. Notice this man's chest. A quick, sharp sniff to ensure immediate absorption by the sensitive membranes of the nostril. Oh, how can he? Not content with assuming control of the forces of the body, drugs make their onslaught on the mind. Taken before the habit has formed its grip upon the nerve strings of its victim, the effects were soothing, stimulating, and excitingly pleasurable. But once the habit becomes master and has fastened deep its hold, the picture changes. Now the victim is a slave and must obey. Gone are the pleasurable sensations of the drug. Now to feel normal, he must have his narcotics. The addict fights off the demand. The weight of this world curse crushes him. Where is his vaunted willpower? Where is his physical resistance, his resolutions, his strength, his optimism? The flesh cringes under the demand. The nervous system is whipped into shreds. The toll is physical pain and mental chaos. It is only a question of hours until the will surrenders. The mind is obsessed by the delusion that tomorrow it will conquer, but tomorrow never comes. Every drug fiend goes through a daily battle, the battle of reason against habit. What chance has this little family in the clutches of this demon? Drugs ruin health, wreck careers, fill prisons and asylums. Notice the difference in these men now. These are from the same stock as the ones you have just seen. Narcotic drug addiction is a municipal, state, national, and international problem. There are three avenues of attacking this problem. The first is to reduce the number of addicts by isolating them and curing them, thus reducing the demand for drugs. The second attack must be directed toward the discouragement and arrest of the street trafficker and distributor, thus striking at the supply. The third avenue of attack is to coordinate all law enforcing agencies by information records and movements of the narcotic criminal. This is a sort of international clearinghouse. The plight of these victims is pathetic. Even if a cure were possible, what can be done with these wasted lives? What is this thing that we have allowed to creep into their souls, destroying the very cream of a nation? See their pitiful attempts at bringing back their health. Look at their miserable bodies creeping along the backyards of the prison. Imagine a country struggling with a problem as you see it here. Here is one being picked up. Watch her swallow paper and all, so they cannot get any evidence on her. Poor creature. As if one day in jail would not tell her pitiful story. These are women peddlers. Can you imagine the finest of the peasantry, good husky wives and mothers, turning to so debasing a profession for the promise of luxuries to come? And here is the luxury: prison garb, coarse goods, unbecoming and miserable to wear. Does it seem possible that heads can be turned so easily? However, we have many in our own prisons for the same reason. This gives you a slight idea of the suffering of a woman addict after 24 hours without the drug her system must have. That pitiful face tells the story of hours of suffering. The yawn and sneezes indicate a terrific yen. And by the way, that is where our modern slang word comes from. The urgent desire of an addict for his drug. The prison hospital for addicts reveals many a sorry. Hospital for addicts are going through the agony of cure by withdrawal. Notice how they keep their heads on the hard frame of the bed. See the spots where the paint is rubbed off by their weary tossing. This must be explained. When drugs are withdrawn, an addict has a dreadful feeling of insecurity, aside from the agonizing pains he suffers. He has the continuous sensation of falling. His head is heavy, and he feels continuously smothered. These poor devils, imagine paying such a price for a few minutes of folly. This is the thing every addict fears. They lie, cheat, and steal to keep from being without their drug. This is their existence. Fear is the governing factor in their lives. Poor fools. How little we know about their wretched existence, their misery, their fight to return to normalcy, and very few ever regaining it. They suffer intense nausea, accompanied by severe pains in the muscles of the legs and arms. This is nature fighting a battle to rid the system of those awful poisons. Here are the real unfortunates. These are the addicts who have neither home nor hospital accommodation. They beg in the streets and use the miserable pittance they get to buy drugs rather than food. The craving for drugs is so strong. These people are chased from town to town, are wanted nowhere, and many die of starvation. The narcotic evil is of sufficient importance to have warranted several world conferences, yet the general public knows little about it. It is the most terrifying of all social menaces. America today is facing a vital problem. Her unprotected coasts are open to the drug smuggling trade of the world. With the repeal of the 18th Amendment, thousands of bootleggers will be free to turn to drug peddling. Remember, these men have been learning for 15 years how to operate outside the law. These are views in the asylum for addicts. This is the ultimate result of incurable addiction. How can men and women go out and deliberately invite such disaster? Yet our government statistics show that 98% of the addicts in America are voluntary. They are thrill seekers, or take it for rest or stimulation, depending on the person, or fall into bad company and stop the use of drugs for a lark. Once in its hideous clutches, there is no escape without permanent injury. Why will God's chosen creatures misuse their divine powers in such a manner? This awful thing destroys the will, disrupts the system, and enslaves its victims. Every child should be taught the wholesome respect of his remarkable body. There is no need for this menace. Everyone should know the consequences of the use of narcotics. Stop drug addiction, and there will be no need for nations to manufacture it illicitly. Stop the demand, and there will be no need for a supply. Our institutions give forth these pitiful stories. This is a world problem, not just Egypt's. These examples are hers, but the whole human race is affected by drugs in the same way. Location makes no difference in the menace. Shun these drugs as you would a poisonous reptile. They are far deadlier. These poor wretches are destined for a frightful living death, patiently hoping that they soon may be mercifully taken. We treat these poor misguided souls as criminals, and they are criminals in a certain sense, yet they were made so by a greedy industry which makes its profit by destroying the one thing which divides man from beast. These pitiable objects of human degradation, hard as it is to believe, could be members of our own families in the clutches of this evil. Human wretchedness in its lowest form. All dope-drenched countries have scenes similar to these. The cities of the Far East are infested with common beggars such as these. China has for centuries been trying to lift herself above the slime of drug addiction. In 1762, the Empress of China mowed the opium poppy. How did the other nations help? They didn't. They supplied her people illicitly with drugs at a greater cost and forced her back into production to protect herself. The marks on this man's body are self-inflicted. They are caused by knives, glass, sharp tin, or anything with which to make an opening in the skin in order to inject drugs. Can you imagine anyone so punishing himself as a necessity? Here is the blessed end to which all comes sooner or later. The addict is fortunate indeed who is properly buried, for there are very few who have any money left. One awful aspect of this thing is that whole families have been impoverished, withholding the knowledge from the world that one of their family is an addict. But he, without sufficient money for burial, has but one alternative: the pit, where the dying go to await the end, to be devoured by vultures in death as they were devoured by drugs in life.